So it's that analysis paralysis. You're constantly ruminating about all the potential options and whether it's going to work out or not. And you get stuck in your head, and that leads to stress. Welcome to Empower and Evolve, the vortex of growth that you have been looking for. I am your host, Kat Tunnyberg. I'm a mindset coach for female leaders, and I am committed to helping you cultivate the mindset shifts that generate you wild success. Each episode, we explore ways to tap into your true potential. We face the shadows that hold you back, and we embrace the journey toward your most abundant life. If you love what you learn here today, then I invite you to share this episode with someone that needs to hear it. Right, it's time to plunge in. But my love, time for another episode. Embodiment versus overthinking. This is probably one of the most common themes I work with my clients. We live in a society where we spend so much time in our heads, and we're constantly worrying about the past, worrying about the future, and we're so disconnected from actually being present with ourselves, with our intuition, with our bodies, with the true knowledge that we have. And I really find in my work with my clients that most people have a lot of intellectual knowledge, but they're not embodying it. And this is why the embodiment piece of my work is so important, especially feminine embodiment, because I predominantly work with women, and I predominantly work with women who are high achievers, hyper independent. Some of them have already experienced great success in their lives, yet they're burnt out and they've completely put themselves last. And these women, most of the time, have all the intellectual knowledge about what they need to do. But when it comes to embodying that, they're so far away from it. So today I wanted to record a podcast episode to teach you a little bit about the difference and why embodiment is so important. First of all, let's talk about overthinking. Let's just talk about it. In our society, we get taught that we should think about it. If you think about it. If you think back to any time when there was a major decision in your life, and maybe you talk to the people around you, and everyone's always like, take some time, think about it. Or, oh, I need some time to think about it. This is cultural conditioning. We get taught that we have to think about it, and we have to analyze and be super logical, super rational. We have to think about all the possible scenarios and make a decision from there. So we spend all this time in our heads. And I don't know if you've ever heard the saying, but if you're in your head, you're dead. So in my work, I want to get you out of your head and I want to get you back into your body, because your wisdom lies in your body. And if I tie this back into human design, there is this thing in human design called your authority, which is your innate decision-making process. And all of the different authorities have a different way of making decisions. Some are meant to ride out their emotional wave. They're meant to take 24 hours to feel into the decision. Then we have the sacral authority, which is a gut response. Like you'll either have a yes or a no in a moment in response to something that is happening outside of you. And then there's splenic as well. It's kind of similar to sacral, but instead of having a gut response, it's just this intuitive knowing. And then there's the self-projected, where you're meant to hear yourself talk about it. Same with the mental. And then there's a few others. I have done another podcast episode on this at some point. I'll try and find it. I'll try and get Alexis to find it and put it in the show notes. How do you like that I'm actually naming her now, by the way? So you can get to know my virtual assistant a little bit. Alexis, she's amazing. Um, so there's not a single human who is meant to make decisions from their heads. The decisions that are right for us are meant to come from our body. And we all have a different decision-making process. So for me, it's the emotional wave. And I've spent most of my life really over rationalizing and overthinking and making decisions from my head rather than my body. And it wasn't until I really started to experiment with using my emotional authority and feeling into my feelings to see what felt right in regards to decision that things really started to shift. And I still use this like all the time, all the time. When I want to make an investment, when I like decide what's right for me, blah, 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 like all the time. I'm just feeling into the feeling and I'm seeing what the predominant emotion is. Anyway, I wasn't going to talk too deep into this on this episode. So I'm going to kind of shush it here and remind you, no one is meant to make decisions from their heads. Yet as a society, most people spend so much time in their heads. So it's that consistent excessive analysis paralysis. You're constantly ruminating about all the potential options and whether it's going to work out or not. And you get stuck in your head, and that leads to stress. And then you're feeling anxious, you are feeling depressed. And I don't know if you've ever heard this, but if you are someone who is depressed, how much time do you spend worrying about the past or shaming yourself about the past or letting the past run the show? I was actually talking to a client today who's in a terrible situation in her life and she needs to change, but she's afraid to change because something happened in the past and she's afraid that it's going to repeat again. So instead, she's not doing anything about it. Well, she is now, but I had to call her out on it first. And then there's the other side. If you're someone who experiences a lot of anxiety, I wonder how much time you spend thinking about and worrying about the future and all the potential outcomes. What will happen if this happens, that happens, that happens. I remember learning this at one point and being like, if you're depressed, you spend too much time in the past. If you're anxious, you spend too much time in the future. When you're really able to come into the present moment, and there's only ever the present, there's really only now. When you're able to truly learn to live in the present, that's when things change. And that's where embodiment happens. Because embodiment really is pure presence. It's this deeper connection to your physical sensations, to your emotions, and to your intuition. It's just noticing when things come up from within your body and allowing that to move through you. Like even yesterday, I had my yoga class and I just looked over to my left here and I saw my altar and I saw my card decks and I just had this intuitive knowing in the moment being like, you need to bring your cards to the yoga class tonight. And I was like, that's weird. I never bring my cards, but I have learned to trust these intuitive hits. They've led me to incredible situations in my life. So I was like, okay, I'll just bring them. So then I got to yoga and I asked my students, like, what is it that you want to work on today? What's the requests? And the requests were hips and low back. So I hosted this beautiful slow flow and deep stretch class where we got really deep into the hips. And I'm very sensitive to the energy of the room. And I noticed the energy become dense and heavy, which is very normal when we're doing hip openers because we carry a lot of our emotions and memories in our hips. So we were collectively in the class moving through a lot. And as I was moving them through it, I was like, this is why I was meant to bring these cards. I'm meant to pull a card for the collective at the end with everything that we've moved through today. So I pulled the card at the end, I read it, and I had so many of my beautiful yogis come up to me and be like, wow, that's exactly what I needed to hear. And funnily enough, the card said, trust yourself. I was like, well, there you go. So I shared with them the story of how the card deck just jumped at me. and how I just trusted that. Like, that's embodiment. Embodiment is really living in your body and being connected to these sensations, these emotions, this intuition. And embodiment also means that you're embodying everything you've learned. Sometimes I hop on connection calls with potential new clients, and they're telling me everything. They know everything about how they should live their lives and what's holding them back and this and that, and they've done this work and they've taken this course and they've done this certification, blah, 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 blah. Yet they're still unhappy. They still feel unworthy. They're still afraid to make themselves seen. They still don't take action. They're still running in loops. This is the perfect example of you have all this knowledge in your head, intellectualized, and yet you have not yet embodied it. This is the perfect example of being book smart versus street smart. When you're street smart, you've actually been able to take the knowledge and experience it through your own lived sensation. And that's why, personally, for me, I don't care about your certifications. I don't care about this. All I care about is, have you got lived experience on what you teach about? Have you gone through what you're teaching about? Do you actually embody the knowledge that you share? Do you use it in your daily life? And there was definitely a time when I first became an entrepreneur and started my own business where I was teaching intellectual knowledge. I had not yet fully embodied it. And there are still parts that I'm still embodying because it's a continuous lifetime journey. And yet, looking back, it almost felt like I was just regurgitating information. And these days, it's more like I have an idea and then I teach on it. And I teach you my way through what I have learned from my experience. And that's why you can't teach experience. You can't teach embodied knowledge. Someone has to experience it to teach it. And if we were to take this into the layers of learning, where, we start at unconscious incompetence, you don't know that you don't know. So you're blissfully ignorant. Then we have conscious incompetence. You're aware that there is something out there that you want to learn, but you haven't yet learned it. Then the next level is conscious competence. So you've learned something and you're aware of it. And then the final level, which in my opinion is mastery and embodiment, is unconscious competence. You know, and you don't even know how you know. And this is so often the case for me. Like when I'm in coaching sessions with clients, when I'm recording things just flow through me. And it is part also channeling. It's part that embodied knowledge. It's all coming together. And then if someone asks me to repeat what I just said, I'm like, literally, I have no idea. Because it just comes through, because I'm unconsciously competent in certain things. And then there's things where I'm consciously competent and things where I'm unconsciously competent, and places where I'm unconsciously incompetent. I want you to get to that embodiment phase. I want you to actually live your experiences. I want you to become the leader who takes her life experiences and distills them into power and knowledge. This is something I've been talking to a lot of my clients about is, terrible things happen to us sometimes. And I do have a strong belief that everything happens for us. Yet we're not able to actually step into that level where everything happens for us until we're able to take all the terrible things that happen to us and distill the wisdom that we gain from that and embody that wisdom and take it with us. Because there's always something to be learned. There's always something to be gained. There's always something to be overcome. And when we're able to do that, that's when we become embodied in the wisdom. And that's where I want you to come to. And that's why embodiment is so powerful, and especially feminine embodiment, because the feminine is deeply intuitive. The feminine can hold both the place of being the nurturer and at the same time put herself first and have strong boundaries. She knows when her body is screaming her to slow down and to take a pause, so that she knows when to stop, so that she doesn't get to burnout. Embodiment is also when you're able to really own all of who you are, your quirks, your values, your opinions, your beliefs, and allow yourself to be seen in it. That's feminine leadership. When you're able to be vulnerable with all of you and show all these parts of you and be embodied in that, be present with that. That's feminine leadership. And these are the themes that we're going to be diving into in my newest masterclass, Becoming the Matriarch, which is happening on January 21st. So if you're listening to this podcast episode before then, make sure to go to the show notes to register. And after that, the recording will be available for a while. So reach out to me if you want to check it out. And I can see where we're at with the recording. I want 2025 to be the year where you step into your feminine leadership, where it's no longer about having all the intellectual knowledge, but it's about embodying the knowledge. That's what I want 2025 to be for you, where you connect to your intuition and you let it guide you, where you can hold the space of being the nurturer and helping others, but at the same time recognizing that you need to nurture yourself first, where you come from a place of flow, not hustle, where you establish strong boundaries, where you set goals and work towards the things that are actually important to you, not something that society told you to. Because there's a difference. That's what I want 2025 to be for you. And if that's what you want from 2025, join me in Becoming the Matriarch. Link is in the caption. I love you. Share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. If you had a great takeaway, share it onto your socials. Tag me at It's Coach Kat. Let's spread this information. This is one of the gifts that I am bringing into this new age of Aquarius that we are ushering in. Embodiment. So that you can learn to truly be present and step into your feminine leadership. That's my gift. So let me help it. Let me help me spread it. I love you. Thank you for joining me on the Empower and Evolve podcast. I hope that today's episode has sparked a new insight, or perhaps reminded you of your own power to manifest change. If you found value in our time together, I invite you to subscribe and share this podcast with someone who might need a little reminder of their own magical power. It would mean the world to me if you could take just 2 minutes to review the podcast and help it reach more people. And remember, the journey of transformation is ongoing, and sometimes the most powerful step that we can take is to simply pause, breathe, and realign with our deepest intention. Until next time.